Two girls, daughters of a millionaire, are trapped in their home at the mercy of the rising waters. Not knowing what to do, the housemaid risks her life to save them, facing the strength of the current. With extreme courage, she leads them to safety, proving that true worth lies not in money but in sacrifice. Chapter 1. Turbulent Waters. The small town of St. Sebastian, Louisiana, situated on the banks of the mighty Mississippi River in the heart of the United States, was known for its tranquility and the harmonious relationship its residents maintained with the water. Riverfolk by tradition, they knew how to respect the river's natural cycles, wisely predicting when the waters would rise or fall. It was knowledge passed down from generation to generation, something that not even the most sophisticated meteorological equipment could surpass. Jenna, a 45-year-old woman with hands calloused by hard work and a generous smile, was part of this tradition. Born and raised in the town, she knew every bend of the river, every sign the clouds gave before the rains. However, she no longer made her living from fishing or farming like her ancestors. Jenna worked as a housekeeper in the mansion of Theodore Mendoza, a businessman from New York City who had settled in the region about 5 years ago, building an imposing residence on the highest ground in town. The Mendoza mansion was a monument to opulence amidst the simplicity of the place. With its 3 stories, swimming pool, lush gardens and a privileged view of the river, the house stood out in the landscape as a symbol of the social chasm that separated Theodore from the rest of the local population. It was there that Jenna worked 6 days a week, cleaning the enormous rooms, polishing the imported furniture, and above all, caring for the twins, Beatrice and Sophia, the businessman's 15-year-old teenage daughters. The girls were polar opposites. Beatrice, the elder by just 3 minutes, was extroverted, impulsive and full of energy. With wavy brown hair and honey-colored eyes, she had her father's adventurous spirit. Sophia, on the other hand, was introverted and calculating. Her straight, dark hair framed a face of delicate features, and her green eyes always seemed to assess everything around her with meticulous precision. Both had been raised in New York City, attending the best schools and socializing only with people from the same social circle. The move to St. Sebastian, Louisiana, was a culture shock that, even after 5 years, they had not yet fully assimilated. To the twins, Jenna was nothing more than a maid, someone who was there to meet their needs, clean up their messes, and endure their teenage whims. They rarely thanked her for her services, and often they didn't even notice the woman's presence in the rooms of the house. It was as if Jenna were invisible, part of the furniture or an appliance programmed to perform tasks. "Sophia, have you seen my blue top? The Dolce one?" Beatrice asked, rummaging through her closet filled with pieces she had never worn more than twice. "Ask the maid to look for it. It's her job, isn't it?" Sophia replied without taking her eyes off her phone where she was swiping through photos of her friends in New York City. "Jenna! Jenna!" Beatrice yelled from the top of the stairs. Jenna, who was in the kitchen preparing lunch, wiped her hands on her apron and hurried up. She was used to interrupting her tasks to answer the girls' calls, which could rarely wait. "Yes, Beatrice," she answered, slightly out of breath from the quick assent. "I need my blue top, the one I bought last month. Where is it?" Jenna took a deep breath. "It's in your dresser, 3rd drawer, left side. I folded it and put it away yesterday after it came back from the laundry." Beatrice rolled her eyes. "I already looked there and it's not." Without arguing, Jenna approached the dresser, opened the 3rd drawer, and, with precise movements, found the item in question, exactly where she had said it would be. "Here it is," she said, holding the top out to the young woman. Beatrice mumbled, taking the clothing without a word of thanks and immediately starting to change, as if Jenna were no longer there. This was daily life in the Mendoza mansion. Theodore, always busy with his business, spent most of his time on trips to New York, Washington, D.C., or other financial centers. The girls, left with excessive freedom and without the constant guidance of a father figure, treated the house and the staff as extensions of their own desires and whims. On that specific morning, as Jenna finished preparing lunch, something in the air bothered her. The sky, normally a vibrant blue this time of year, was heavy with dark clouds. The wind, which usually blew gently, now howled through the trees with an unusual intensity. For someone who knew the signs of nature as she did, this was not a good omen. Theodore had left the night before for a business meeting in New Orleans and wouldn't be back before the weekend. The girls were alone with Jenna and Paul, the groundskeeper who took care of the garden and the property's external maintenance. Mr. Evans, Theodore's driver, had gone with his boss, leaving only the more modest car in the garage. "Jenna, are you seeing this?" Paul called from the kitchen window, pointing to the sky. "I've never seen the weather turn this fast." Jenna came closer, observing the clouds that now covered the entire horizon. "You're right, Paul. This isn't normal. The sky doesn't even look like this during flood season." "You think a big storm is coming?" he asked, scratching his head of graying hair. "I don't know, but we'd better get ready. Close the basement windows tight and put away the tools. I'll check if we have batteries for the flashlights and enough candles," Jenna replied, already feeling a knot in her stomach that was not just fear, but the instinct of someone who grew up respecting the power of the water. As they worked quickly to prepare the house, the first drops of rain began to fall. Thick and heavy, they hit the roof with a metallic sound that soon turned into a chaotic symphony as the intensity increased. In a matter of minutes, what was a heavy rain had turned into a veritable deluge. The twins, drawn by the noise, came down to the main living room, where large glass windows offered a panoramic view of the town below and the river beyond. "Wow, what a crazy storm!" Beatrice exclaimed, pressing her face against the glass to get a better look. "Look how fast the river is already rising." Sophia, more cautious, kept her distance from the windows. "Is it safe for us to be here? What if lightning strikes?" Jenna entered the room carrying some flashlights and candles. "Girls, you'd better stay away from the windows. This storm is very strong." Beatrice turned to Jenna with a disdainful expression. "Relax, Jenna. This house was built to withstand hurricanes. My dad spent a fortune on it." "It's not the house that worries me, it's the land," Jenna replied, leaving the flashlights on the center table. "I've seen these rains before. They can cause landslides even in the highest areas." Sophia, always more attentive, noticed the seriousness in the housekeeper's tone. "Do you really think it could be dangerous?" Before Jenna could answer, a deafening crash cut through the air. The electricity flickered for a few seconds before going out completely, plunging the house into the gloom of the stormy afternoon. "Damn it!" Beatrice shouted. "Now what? How am I going to charge my phone?" Jenna quickly lit some candles and distributed the flashlights. "That's the least of our problems right now. Let's go to the top floor. It's safer." Paul ran into the room, completely soaked. "Jenna, the river is rising too fast. I've never seen anything like it." "The water has already reached the main street and it's coming our way." The groundskeeper's words struck everyone like a bolt of lightning. Even the mansion, built on high ground, would not be safe if the river level continued to rise at that speed. For the first time, real fear was reflected in the twins' eyes. "What do we do?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Jenna naturally took control of the situation. "Paul, get drinking water, extra flashlights, and some blankets. Girls, change into something warm and put on sneakers. We don't know how long this storm will last." "But can't we just call someone? The civil defense or the fire department?" questioned Beatrice, her usual tone of superiority now replaced by evident distress. "Without power, the landlines don't work, and with this storm I doubt we have any cell signal," Paul explained, already moving to follow Jenna's instructions. Sophia checked her phone. 0 bars. We're cut off. A thunderous sound of cracking wood came from outside the house, followed by the roar of rushing water. Paul ran to the window. "My God! The retaining wall on the east side gave way. The water is coming into the property," he yelled. Jenna knew the situation was becoming critical rapidly. She had witnessed floods before, but nothing comparable to what was happening. The river, normally a generous friend that provided sustenance and joy for the population, had transformed into an insatiable monster that swallowed everything in its path. "We're going to the 3rd floor now," she ordered firmly. "Take only the essentials. Documents, medicine, dry clothes, quickly." The twins, for the first time, obeyed without question. Fear had broken down all the social barriers that normally separated them from Jenna. In that moment, they were not the millionaire's daughters and she was not the maid. They were just 3 women fighting against the fury of nature. As they climbed the stairs, a tremor ran through the entire structure of the house. The sound of water invading the 1st floor was terrifying. Paul, who had gone to get supplies from the kitchen, shouted something inaudible before an even greater roar shook the mansion's foundations. "Paul!" Jenna shouted, trying to go back. "No!" Sophia grabbed her by the arm. "It's too dangerous. We have to keep going up." Reluctantly, but knowing the young woman was right, Jenna continued the climb. Reaching the 3rd floor, the 3 women took refuge in the master bedroom, which offered the highest position in the house. Through the window they could see the devastation spreading across the town. Submerged houses, uprooted trees, cars floating like toys in a bathtub. The force of the water was relentless and terrifying. "What about Paul?" Beatrice asked, her eyes welling up. "Do you think he—" "Let's hope he managed to get out," Jenna replied, trying to stay calm despite the panic she felt. "He knows this area well, he knows how to protect himself." Sophia approached the window, watching the water continue to rise. "Look, it's almost halfway up the second floor. If it keeps going like this—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen if the water continued to rise. It would soon reach the floor where they were taking refuge. "We have to find a way out of here," Jenna said, scanning the room for anything that could help them. "And go where?" Beatrice asked. "Everything is flooded." Jenna had no answer for that. The entire town was underwater, and the current was too strong to attempt to swim across. They were stranded, and their options were dwindling with every inch the water rose. Sophia, usually so controlled and cool, hugged her knees in a corner of the bed, beginning to tremble. "We're going to die here, aren't we? We're trapped and nobody knows we're here." Jenna sat down beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Don't talk like that. As long as we're breathing, there's hope. I'm a daughter of this river. I grew up in these waters. They may be furious now, but I know how to respect them and survive." The words sounded confident, but Jenna knew the situation was desperate. Looking at the two young women who had always treated her with indifference, she felt a responsibility that went beyond her employment contract. In that moment, she was the only chance of survival for Theodore's daughters. Chapter 2. Invisible ties night fell over St. Sebastian, but the darkness was even denser due to the heavy clouds that blocked any light from the sky. The rain showed no mercy, falling with the same relentless intensity for hours. In the third-floor bedroom, Jenna tried to remain calm as she watched the water level continue to rise through the house. "We need a plan," she said, lighting another candle and placing it on the dresser. "The water is rising more slowly now, but we don't know if it will stop before it gets here." Beatrice, who had kept her face buried in a pillow until then, sat up with eyes red from crying. "My dad will find us, won't he? He always fixes everything." Jenna exchanged a meaningful look with Sophia, who seemed to better understand the gravity of the situation. "Your father is in New Orleans, and with this flood, all the roads must be blocked. Even if he knows what's happening, it will take him a while to get here." "But he has connections, helicopters. He can send someone to get us," Beatrice insisted. Stop being a child," Sophia interrupted with cutting frankness. "Not even Dad's money can control the weather. And besides, how will he know we need help? We have no way to call him." Sophia's words silenced her sister, who sank her face back into the pillow. Jenna felt sorry for them both. Despite all the luxury they were raised in, at that moment they were just scared girls, far from their parents and facing real danger for the first time in their lives. "Let's focus on what we can do," Jenna suggested, picking up a map of the town she had found on the bedroom desk. "If the water keeps rising and we have to leave, we need to know where to go." Sophia moved closer, curious. She had never paid attention to Jenna beyond her duties as a housekeeper, and now she was surprised by the calm and knowledge the woman demonstrated. "You know the area well, don't you?" Sophia asked. "Born and raised here," Jenna answered with a faint smile. "My father was a fisherman, and since I was a child I learned to respect the river. He always used to say, 'Jenna, the Mississippi gives life, but it can also take it if it's not respected.'" "And did he ever see a flood like this?" Sophia questioned, genuinely interested. Jenna shook her head. "Never. In 50 years of living on the riverbank, he never saw the waters rise so fast and with so much force." As they talked, a violent crash shook the structure of the house. The three looked at each other with panicked expressions. "What was that?" Beatrice asked, jumping to her feet. "I think part of the house gave way," Jenna replied, running to the door. "Let's check." They left the room carefully, lighting the way with their flashlights. In the third-floor hallway they could hear the sound of water already invading the second floor. A quick inspection revealed that part of the staircase connecting the second and third floors had collapsed. "We're completely cut off now," Sophia stated, her voice trembling for the first time since the crisis began. Jenna did a quick mental calculation. If the water continued to rise at the same rate in a few hours, it would reach the third floor. They needed to find a way out, and fast. "Let's go back to the room and think," she said, guiding the girls back. In the master bedroom, Jenna examined the windows. They were large and offered a panoramic view of the devastation, but they could also be their only escape route. Outside, just a few yards away, was the roof of an annex of the house, a lower structure that served as a storage shed. "If we can get to that roof, we can stay above the water level for longer," she explained, pointing. "And from there, if necessary, we can try to reach that big tree." Sophia approached the window for a better look. "But how do we get there? It's too far to jump." "We can improvise a bridge or a rope," Jenna suggested, already rummaging through the room for useful materials. "We have the bedsheets, curtains, belts." Beatrice, who was watching the scene with a mixture of fear and admiration, finally asked something that had been puzzling her for a long time. "Why do you care so much? I mean, we were never very nice to you." The question took Jenna by surprise. She stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Beatrice. "Because you are two young women who need help. It doesn't matter how you treated me before. Right now we are just people trying to survive." Sophia, usually so controlled, felt her eyes well up. She had never thought of Jenna as anyone other than the housekeeper who took care of the house. Now she realized there was much more to this simple woman than she had ever noticed. "Thank you," Sophia murmured, the word sounding strange on her lips, accustomed to giving orders, not thanks. A new tremor, stronger than the last, interrupted the moment. This time it wasn't just a crash. The floor itself seemed to tilt slightly. "The foundation of the house is giving way," Jenna exclaimed. "We don't have any more time. We need to get out now." With a speed surprising for her age, Jenna began tying bed sheets and curtains together, forming a sort of rope. Sophia and Beatrice, understanding the urgency, helped as best they could. "We'll need to break the window," Jenna said, looking for something heavy in the room. Sophia found a solid metal lamp. "Will this work?" Jenna nodded. With a precise movement, she struck the window glass, which shattered. The wind and rain immediately invaded the room, blowing out the candles and bringing the reality of the storm inside. "Tie this around your waists," Jenna ordered, handing pieces of bedsheet to the girls. "We'll stay tied together. If one falls, the others can help pull her up." The twins obeyed without question. The social hierarchy that once defined their interactions had been completely dissolved by the urgency of the moment. Now Jenna was not the housekeeper. She was the leader, the only person who seemed to know what to do amidst the chaos. "I'll go first," Jenna decided, securely fastening the makeshift rope to the iron frame of the king-size bed, which was bolted to the floor. "After I'm on the roof, you come one at a time." "No," Sophia interrupted with surprising determination. "I'll go first. I'm the lightest of the three. If the rope can hold my weight, it will hold yours." Jenna hesitated for a moment, but recognized the logic in the girl's argument. "All right, but be very careful." "The rain makes everything slippery." Sophia nodded, fear evident in her eyes, but her determination was stronger. Slowly, she climbed onto the sill of the broken window. The makeshift rope was tied firmly around her waist, and with trembling hands, she began to lower herself down the exterior wall of the house. "That's it, slowly," Jenna encouraged, holding the rope firmly. "Don't look down, just look at where you want to go." The first few steps were the hardest. The wall was slippery, and the strong wind made it difficult to keep her balance. But Sophia, surprising herself, discovered an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. Yard by yard, she descended until her feet touched the roof of the annex. "I made it," she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the noise of the storm. "Great, now it's your turn, Beatrice," Jenna said, helping the other twin climb onto the sill. Beatrice, normally the more confident and adventurous of the two, was now trembling uncontrollably. I can't do it," she muttered, paralyzed by fear. Jenna held the girl's face between her hands, forcing her to look into her eyes. "Beatrice, look at me. You are strong, stronger than you think. Your sister did it, and you can too. We're in this together, understand? I won't let anything happen to you." Something in the firmness of Jenna's gaze calmed Beatrice. She took a deep breath and, with her legs still trembling, positioned herself on the sill. With hesitant movements, she began to descend the wall just as her sister had done. "That's it. Very good," Jenna encouraged. "One step at a time." When Beatrice was halfway down, another tremor shook the house's structure. A section of the exterior wall collapsed, taking with it the foothold where Beatrice had just placed her foot. She slipped, letting out a scream of terror. "Beatrice!" Jenna and Sophia shouted in unison. For a terrible moment, it seemed the young woman would fall, but the makeshift rope held, and Beatrice was left dangling, swinging in the air a few yards from the annex roof. "Help!" she screamed in panic. "I'm slipping!" Jenna knew there was no time to lose. With surprising agility, She tied the other end of the rope around her own waist and began to rapidly descend the wall, ignoring the danger. "Hold on, Beatrice, I'm coming!" she shouted, descending as fast as she could. Reaching Beatrice, Jenna managed to get a hold of the girl. "Hold on to me," she ordered, wrapping an arm around her while using the other to keep them both clinging to the wall. "I can't. I'm going to fall," Beatrice whimpered. "Look at me," Jenna commanded with an authority she had never used before with her employer's daughters. "You are not going to fall. I won't let you, understand? Now hold on to me and we'll go down together." Something in Jenna's voice struck Beatrice deeply. She nodded, clinging to the housekeeper as if her life depended on it, and in fact it did. Together, slowly, they continued their descent until they finally reached the roof where Sophia was waiting, terrified. "You made it!" Sophia exclaimed, hugging her sister and, to her own surprise, including Jenna in the embrace. "I thought I was going to lose you." "We're all okay," Jenna replied, briefly returning the hug before assessing the situation again. "But we can't stay here for long. This roof won't hold if the foundation keeps giving way." The sound of the water was deafening. The river had completely swallowed the first floor of the house and was already reaching the second. The current was so strong it carried whole trees as if they were toothpicks. "Where do we go now?" Sophia asked, looking around. Jenna pointed to a large tree a few yards away. It was an ancient live oak with a thick trunk and strong branches that stretched over a considerable area. "If we can get to that tree, we can climb high and wait for rescue." "But how do we get there?" Beatrice questioned. "Everything is flooded." Jenna assessed the distance. It was too far to jump, and the current between the annex and the tree was too strong to attempt to swim across. They needed something that could float and be steered. "We need a makeshift raft," she said, looking around for materials. The roof of the annex was made of ceramic tiles over a wooden frame. With a joint effort, they managed to pry some planks from the structure. "This will do," Jenna said, gathering the planks. "We'll tie them together with the rest of the sheets and make a floating platform." Sophia and Beatrice worked side by side with Jenna, tying the planks together firmly. The result wasn't pretty, but it looked strong enough to support the weight of all three of them. "Now we need to get down to the water," Jenna explained. "We'll slide the raft off the edge of the roof and then climb down using the rope." The descent to the water was as frightening as the exit through the window. The river level had risen so much that the water was already lapping against the annex roof in threatening waves. When they finally managed to position the makeshift raft in the water, Jenna was the first to test its stability. "Looks like it will hold," she said, sitting in the center of the platform and using a piece of wood as a paddle. "Come on, one at a time." Sophia came down first, followed by Beatrice. The raft dipped slightly with the weight of the three, but it continued to float. The real challenge, however, would be navigating the treacherous current to the tree. "Hold on tight," Jenna instructed, starting to paddle against the current. It was an unequal struggle. The force of the water pushed the raft away from the tree toward the center of the river, where the current was even stronger. Jenna paddled with all her might, but it seemed like a losing battle. "We're not going to make it," Beatrice shouted, clinging to the planks as water splashed over them. "It's not over yet," Jenna replied, determined. "Sophia, grab that piece of wood and help me paddle on the other side." Sophia obeyed, and together they managed to stabilize the raft a little, preventing it from being completely swept away by the current. Slowly, yard by yard, they approached the large live oak. "We're almost there," Jenna encouraged. "Just a little more." When they finally got close enough, Jenna dropped the paddle and grabbed one of the tree's low-hanging branches, pulling the raft closer to the trunk. "Now, Sophia, you first. Climb up the trunk and go as high as you can, where the branches are still strong." Sophia managed to move from the raft to the tree with relative ease, her slimness and agility being advantages at that moment. Beatrice was next, needing a little more help, but eventually managing to secure herself on the lower branches. Jenna was to be the last. But just as she prepared to leave the raft, a particularly strong wave hit the improvised platform, destabilizing it. Jenna lost her balance and fell into the water. "Jenna!" the twins screamed in unison, watching the housekeeper get dragged away by the current. For a terrible instant, it seemed Jenna would be carried away by the river's relentless force. But with an impressive display of willpower, she managed to swim against the current just enough to grab a low branch of the oak. Hanging there, fighting against the force of the water pulling at her body, Jenna made a superhuman effort to hoist herself back to the relative safety of the tree. "Thank God," Beatrice sighed, helping to pull Jenna onto a higher branch. "I thought we'd lost you." The three women, exhausted and soaked, sat on the strongest branches of the live oak, a few yards above the water level that continued to rise. The Mendoza house, once so imposing and secure, was now partially submerged and visibly tilted, with parts of its structure already collapsed. "Now what?" Sophia asked, the adrenaline beginning to subside and give way to exhaustion. "Now we wait," Jenna replied, putting a protective arm around each of the twins. "The rain has to stop at some point, and when it does, the rescues will begin." As they settled as best they could on the branches of the old oak, surrounded by the darkness of the night and the incessant sound of the rain and the raging waters, an invisible tie began to form between these three very different women, a bond forged in danger, in shared fear, and in the mutual trust they had developed over the last few hours. Sophia looked at Jenna, seeing her for the first time, not as the housekeeper, but as the brave and determined woman who had risked her own life to save them. "Thank you," she said simply, but with a sincerity she had never shown before. "No need to thank me," Jenna replied, lightly squeezing the girl's shoulder. "We're in this together." Beatrice, always more emotional, simply rested her head on Jenna's shoulder and cried silently. They were not tears of fear or sadness alone, but also of gratitude and a new, profound understanding of the true value of people beyond their social standing or wealth. Chapter 3. Uncertain Dawn. The night seemed endless for the three women sheltered in the branches of the old live oak. The rain gradually subsided into a fine drizzle, but the water level remained alarmingly high. Jenna did not sleep, keeping watch while the twins, exhausted by the trauma and physical exertion, managed to doze for short periods, leaning against the tree trunk. The first rays of sun finally began to break through the clouds, revealing a scene of devastation that not even Jenna, with all her life experience on the riverbank, could have imagined. St. Sebastian was practically submerged. Only the roofs of the tallest buildings and the tops of the most robust trees were visible above the water's surface. The current remained strong, carrying debris from houses, furniture, appliances, and other objects that once made up the daily lives of the residents. "My God," Sophia murmured, waking with the light and observing the destruction around them. "It looks like the whole town has disappeared." Jenna nodded silently. Her eyes scanned the familiar landscape, now unrecognizable under the murky waters. This town was all she knew, the place where she was born, grew up, and built her life. To see it all destroyed like this was like losing a part of herself. Beatrice woke up next, groaning in pain. The hard branches of the oak were not exactly a comfortable place to spend the night, and every muscle in her body protested. "What time is it?" she asked, trying to stretch her numb legs. "It must be around 6 in the morning," Jenna replied, calculating by the sun's position. "Are you two okay? Did you manage to get some rest?" Sophia made a face. "If you can call that rest. I don't think I've ever slept in such an uncomfortable position in my life." "At least you slept," Beatrice retorted. "I woke up every 5 minutes thinking I was going to fall." "The important thing is that we survived the night," Jenna interrupted, her practical tone cutting through the girls' complaints. "Now we need to think about the next step." Sophia looked around, trying to get her bearings. "Can you see any sign of rescue, boats, helicopters?" Jenna shook her head. "Not yet, but they will come. In disasters like this, rescue teams start with the most densely populated areas. The town center must be the priority." "What about us? We're practically isolated here," Beatrice observed, concern evident in her voice. "We can try to get their attention somehow," suggested Sophia, always the more pragmatic one. "If we see a boat or a helicopter, we need to signal." Jenna agreed. "Let's tear pieces from our clothes. Waving colored fabrics are easier to spot from a distance." As they tore parts of their shirts to improvise flags, Beatrice suddenly stopped, staring intently at Jenna. "How is your family? They live in town too, don't they?" The question caught Jenna by surprise. In all the years working for the Mendozas, neither of the twins had ever shown the slightest interest in her personal life. "My son Joaquin lives in New Orleans, thank God," she replied, gratitude evident in her voice. "As for my sister and her kids, they live in the higher part of town. I hope they're okay." "You have a son?" Sophia asked, genuinely surprised. Jenna smiled faintly despite the situation. "Yes, he's 25. He's in college for environmental engineering, studying ways to prevent disasters like this." The twins exchanged embarrassed glances. They had never thought of Jenna as a person with a family, dreams, and a life beyond the walls of the mansion where she worked. "And his father?" asked Beatrice, always more direct. He passed away 10 years ago, Jenna replied simply. Heart disease. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. The twins realized, perhaps for the first time, how little they knew about the woman who, for 5 years, had taken care of their home and, indirectly, them. The moment was interrupted by a distant but distinctive sound, the noise of an engine. "Listen!" Sophia exclaimed, carefully standing up on the branch where she was sitting. "It sounds like a boat." The three strained their ears. Yes, it was definitely the sound of an engine, and it was getting closer. Quickly they began to wave the pieces of fabric they had prepared, shouting for help with all the strength in their lungs. Soon a small boat appeared, rounding what was once a curve in the main road. 2 men were on board wearing life jackets and helmets with the civil defense emblem. "Over here! Help!" the 3 shouted in unison, frantically waving the pieces of fabric. The men spotted the movement and directed the boat toward the tree where they were. The approach was slow and careful, as there was a lot of floating debris that could damage the engine. "Is everyone okay up there?" one of the men shouted when they were close enough. "Yes, but we've been here since last night," Jenna replied. With skillful maneuvers, the men positioned the boat directly under the tree. One of them extended his arms. "We're taking you to the shelter." "Who's first?" "The girls," Jenna answered immediately. "Beatrice, you go first." Beatrice, normally so confident, now seemed hesitant. The descent from the tree to the boat would be risky, especially with the still strong current rocking the vessel. "It'll be all right," Jenna assured her. "They're professionals." With help from Sophia and Jenna, Beatrice managed to position herself on the lowest branch of the tree. From there, very carefully, she extended her legs until the men could grab her and pull her into the boat. "Okay, one is safe," said one of the men. "Next." Sophia was next, repeating the process with a bit more ease, thanks to her lighter and more agile build. Finally, it was Jenna's turn. "Be careful, ma'am," one of the men warned. "That branch looks fragile." Jenna, who had faced the greatest dangers the night before to save the girls, now felt strangely vulnerable. Her muscles ached from the effort of the last few hours, and exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. With slow, deliberate movements, she positioned herself on the lowest branch. Suddenly, the branch Jenna was leaning on cracked. Before anyone could react, it broke, and Jenna fell into the turbulent water. "Jenna!" the twins screamed in panic. One of the civil defense men immediately jumped into the water, swimming toward the spot where Jenna had submerged. For a few terrible seconds, there was no sign of her. Then, to everyone's relief, both Jenna and the rescuer emerged a few yards from the boat. "I've got her!" the man shouted, swimming back with Jenna clinging firmly to his vest. With a joint effort, they managed to hoist Jenna into the boat. She coughed, expelling some water she had swallowed, but she was conscious and apparently without serious injuries. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, the genuine concern in her voice surprising Jenna herself. "I am," she answered between coughs. "Just need to catch my breath." The other civil defense man handed Jenna a thermal blanket to warm up. "We're taking you to the shelter now. There are doctors, hot food, and places to rest there." As the boat navigated slowly through the wreckage of what was once a vibrant town, the twins remained unusually silent, each lost in her own thoughts. For Sophia and Beatrice, it was as if a veil had been lifted. The privileged life they led, the problems that once seemed so important, the parties missed in New York, the designer clothes they couldn't wear in the countryside, the constant complaints about the boredom of St. Sebastian, all of it now seemed trivial and even shameful. Jenna, for her part, looked at the submerged buildings with a heavy heart. That town was her home, the setting of all her memories. To see it all destroyed this way was a deep pain that the girls, despite all their newfound empathy, could never fully comprehend. After about 20 minutes of carefully navigating through the debris, they reached an area where the water was shallower. There, in the highest part of the town, a makeshift shelter had been set up in a state school. Dozens of boats were docked nearby, and hundreds of people milled about, some seeking shelter, others offering help. "We're here," announced the boat's pilot, maneuvering to a makeshift landing point. "Be careful getting out. The platform might be slippery." With the help of the rescuers, the 3 women disembarked. In the schoolyard, medical tents had been set up, along with food distribution points and a large board with lists of names, people found and people still missing. Jenna immediately headed for the board, her eyes anxiously scanning the list of survivors, looking for the names of her sister and nephews. "Are you looking for someone?" asked a volunteer who was organizing the lists. My sister, Irene Santos, and her children, Matthew and Larissa, Jenna replied, her voice trembling with worry. The volunteer quickly consulted a clipboard. Irene Santos? Yes, she's on the register. Arrived last night with 2 children. They should be in the shelter area in the gymnasium. A sob of relief escaped Jenna's lips. Thank God, she murmured. Sophia and Beatrice, who had accompanied Jenna, felt genuinely happy for the news. It was strange for them to experience this sincere concern for the well-being of someone who, until the day before, was just one employee among many. Should we go look for them? Beatrice suggested, hesitantly placing a hand on Jenna's shoulder. Jenna nodded, wiping away a discreet tear. You 2 need to go through the medical checkup first, she reminded them, always putting the girls' well-being before her own. You 2, Sophia insisted. Then we can look for your family together. This simple declaration of solidarity touched Jenna deeply. It was the first time the twins had shown any real concern for her well-being. In the medical tent, they were seen quickly. Apart from a few scratches and bruises, none of them had serious injuries. They received IV fluids, preventive antibiotics, and were advised to rest. You're the Mendoza family, aren't you? The doctor asked while examining Sophia. Your father has been informed that you've been found. He's trying to get to the town, but the roads are blocked. Our dad knows we're okay, Beatrice asked, relieved. Yes, as soon as you were identified by the rescue team, your names were added to the official survivor list, which is being shared with authorities in neighboring cities, the doctor explained. After the medical checkup, they were directed to the gymnasium, where hundreds of mattresses had been laid out to accommodate the displaced. The place was crowded, with entire families gathered in small spaces, trying to preserve a minimum of privacy amidst the calamity. Jenna! Jenna! A shout cut through the gymnasium's buzz. A middle-aged woman, physically similar to Jenna, came running toward her, followed by 2 children, a boy of about 12 and a slightly younger girl. Irene! Jenna exclaimed, running to meet her sister. The embrace between them was long and charged with emotion. The children soon joined in, enveloping their aunt in a group hug. Sophia and Beatrice watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. There was joy in seeing Jenna reunited with her family, but also a strange feeling of exclusion. They were not part of that world, that network of affection. I thought something had happened to you, Irene said, holding her sister's face between her hands. When I heard that the area around the Mendoza mansion was one of the hardest hit. I'm fine, Jenna assured her. Thank God we're all fine. It was then that Irene noticed the twins' presence. Her expression shifted from surprise to something close to reverence. You are Mr. Mendoza's daughters, she said, not as a question but as a statement. The girls nodded, suddenly embarrassed. They were used to being recognized and treated with deference, but now it seemed out of place, even awkward. Your sister saved our lives, Sophia said, surprising everyone with the sincerity in her voice. Without her, we wouldn't be here. Irene looked at Jenna with renewed pride. That doesn't surprise me one bit. My sister has always been the bravest of us. Are you and the children okay? Jenna asked, quickly changing the subject, uncomfortable with the praise. We are, Irene replied. Our house was hit, but we managed to get out in time. We lost almost everything, but we're alive, and that's what matters. The following hours were spent adapting to the new reality. In the shelter, everyone was equal, victims of a catastrophe that did not distinguish between rich and poor, employers and employees. The twins, accustomed to privileges and comforts, now faced the same lines to use the chemical toilets, to receive the simple meals distributed by volunteers, to get donated dry clothes. Surprisingly, they did not complain. There was something about the experience of nearly losing their lives, of being saved by someone they barely considered a whole person, that had changed something fundamental within them. At lunchtime, they sat with Jenna and her family in a corner of the gymnasium. The food was simple, rice, beans, and meat, but after nearly 24 hours without eating, it seemed like a feast. For you live in New York, right? Asked Matthew, Jenna's nephew, looking curiously at the twins. What's it like? Is it true there are buildings so tall you can't see the top? Beatrice smiled for the first time since the tragedy began. Some are pretty tall, yes, but you can see the top of most of them. And have you been to Disney World? Asked Larissa, her eyes shining with curiosity. We have, Sophia replied. A few times. What's it like? The girl insisted. Sophia hesitated, suddenly aware of the privilege her words carried. How could she describe Disney World to a child who might have just lost everything she owned. "It's beautiful," she said finally, opting for simplicity. "But you know, places aren't as important as people. That's a lesson I'm learning now." Jenna looked at Sophia with an expression of surprise and approval. There was a maturity in those words that she had never seen in the young woman before. As the day progressed, more people arrived at the shelter. Some brought devastating news about completely destroyed areas, entire families missing, lost animals. Others brought stories of hope, miraculous rescues, examples of solidarity, human resilience in the face of disaster. In the late afternoon, a commotion at the entrance of the gymnasium caught everyone's attention. A tall man, with an imposing build and expensive clothes, though wrinkled and stained with mud, had arrived. His eyes anxiously scanned the room, searching for someone. "Dad!" the twins shouted in unison, getting up and running toward him. Theodore Mendoza opened his arms, receiving his daughters in a tight, emotional hug. Tears streamed freely down his normally controlled and austere face. For a few minutes, no one said anything. Just the relief of being together again, alive and well, was enough. When they finally separated, Theodore held each of his daughters' faces, examining them as if to make sure they were really there, really okay. "Are you hurt? Do you need anything?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "We're fine, Dad," Sophia assured him. Thanks to Jenna. It was then that Theodore noticed Jenna's presence, who was observing the family reunion from a few yards away next to her own family. "Jenna," he called, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughters told me what happened, how you—" Theodore stopped, unable to continue. Words seemed insufficient to express what he felt at that moment. "It was nothing, Mr. Mendoza," Jenna replied, uncomfortable with the attention. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Beatrice contradicted, surprising everyone. "Not everyone would have risked their own life like you did. Not everyone would have the courage, the strength, and the heart that you have." A silence heavy with meaning settled between them. In that moment, the social barriers that normally separated them seemed dissolved by the tragedy and the recognition of a deeper truth. A person's real value is not in their bank account or social position, but in their actions and their capacity to love beyond themselves. Theodore extended his hand to Jenna, but at the last moment, in a gesture that surprised even himself, he pulled her into a respectful, yet genuinely grateful hug. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for saving my daughters." For Jenna, who had dedicated years of her life working for wealthy families, always invisible in her role as a housekeeper, that recognition meant more than any amount of money could express. It was the acknowledgement of her humanity, of her value as a person. As the sun began to set over the devastated city, casting golden and reddish hues over the destruction and the hope that coexisted in that scene, something new and unexpected began to be born from the waters of the tragedy, a deeper understanding of what really matters in life and ties that transcended the divisions imposed by society. Chapter 4. Reconstructions. 3 weeks had passed since the devastating flood that turned St. Sebastian into a scene of destruction. The waters had receded considerably, revealing the rubble of what were once homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses. Thick mud covered everything, a persistent reminder of nature's fury. Theodore Mendoza had taken his daughters to New Orleans shortly after finding them at the shelter. There, staying in a luxurious hotel, the twins had access to all the comfort money could buy: spacious rooms, gourmet meals, new clothes to replace those they had lost. Materially, it was as if the tragedy had never happened, but something had changed within Sophia and Beatrice. The luxury that once seemed natural and deserved now had a bitter taste. Every hot shower, every elaborate meal, every new piece of clothing brought back memories of the faces of the people in the shelter, people who had lost everything and for whom a simple mattress on a gymnasium floor was a luxury. "Dad, have you decided what you're going to do with the house?" Sophia asked during breakfast at the hotel restaurant. Theodore lowered the newspaper he was reading. "The engineers said the main structure was compromised. It will be more practical to demolish what's left and build a new one." "And when will the reconstruction begin?" she insisted. Theodore studied his daughter with curiosity. Sophia had never shown interest in practical matters related to the family's properties. "I don't know if it's worth rebuilding there," he replied cautiously. "I'm thinking of selling the land and buying something in New Orleans. It would be more convenient for business and safer for you." "But what about St. Sebastian, the people in the town?" Beatrice asked, joining the conversation. Are you just going to abandon everything? Theodore looked from one daughter to the other, genuinely surprised by the direction of the conversation. I don't understand. You always hated living there. Since we moved, you haven't stopped complaining and asking to go back to New York. The twins exchanged meaningful glances. It was true. For 5 years they had made their father's life a living hell with their constant complaints about the small country town where they were forced to live. Things have changed, Dad, Sophia said finally. We've changed. Because of the flood? He asked, trying to understand. Because of everything, Beatrice replied, uncharacteristically serious. Because of Jenna. The housekeeper's name hung in the air like an unasked question. Theodore had not yet discussed with his daughters what to do about her. Technically, with the house destroyed, there was no longer a need for her services. The common practice would be to offer severance pay for the loss of the job and move on. Speaking of Jenna, he began, choosing his words carefully, do you know where she is now? How is she? She's with her family, in one of the temporary shelters the government set up on the outskirts of town, Sophia answered promptly. We talked to her on the phone yesterday. Theodore raised his eyebrows, surprised. You're keeping in touch with her? Of course, Beatrice replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She saved our lives, Dad. Theodore nodded, thoughtful. Since the night he found his daughters at the shelter, something had been bothering him. A sense of debt that no monetary value seemed capable of settling. What do you think we should do? He asked finally, a consultation he would have never made with his daughters before the flood. Sophia sat up straighter in her chair, her expression serious. I think we should help rebuild St. Sebastian. Not just our house, but the entire town. And how would we do that? Theodore questioned, genuinely curious. You have contacts, influence, resources, Sophia argued. You could mobilize other business leaders, lobby the government, organize work crews. She's right, Dad, Beatrice supported. Many of those people lost everything. They need help to start over. Theodore observed his daughters with a mixture of surprise and pride. These were not the same spoiled girls who complained about the lack of shopping malls and nightclubs in St. Sebastian. There was a maturity in their eyes, a social consciousness he didn't recognize. And what about Jenna specifically? He asked. What do you suggest? The twins again exchanged a look as if they had already discussed the matter between themselves. She lost her house, all her furniture, practically everything she had, Sophia began. We think she deserves more than just severance pay, Beatrice completed. She deserves a new chance, a better life. Theodore nodded slowly. I agree. I've been thinking a lot about this. Jenna is not just an employee who did her job well. She saved the most precious thing in my life. A significant silence settled between them. For Theodore, a man accustomed to evaluating everything in financial terms, this was an unprecedented situation. How do you put a price on the lives of your daughters? How do you adequately reward someone who had risked their own life to save them? I'm going back to St. Sebastian today, he announced, making a decision. I want to see the situation for myself and talk to Jenna. We're going with you, Sophia declared immediately. It's not necessary, Theodore replied. The town is still in a precarious condition, with mud everywhere and the risk of disease. We're going, Beatrice insisted with surprising firmness. St. Sebastian is our town now, too. Theodore didn't argue further. Something in his daughter's determined tone dissuaded him from any attempt to shield them from the difficult reality they would encounter. A few hours later, the trio boarded Theodore's private helicopter, bound for St. Sebastian. From the aircraft's window, the devastation was even more evident. Vast areas that were once densely populated neighborhoods now looked like vacant lots covered in mud and debris. Upon landing in a makeshift field on the outskirts of town, they were greeted by a scene of intense activity. Rescue teams, volunteers, civil defense workers, and residents worked tirelessly to clean up and recover the affected areas. It's worse than I imagined, Theodore murmured as they walked through what was once the town's main street. The twins remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of the destruction. Here and there, they recognized structures: the pharmacy where they used to buy sunscreen, the ice cream shop they frequented on weekends, the small bookstore where Sophia occasionally found interesting titles. All destroyed, covered in mud, reduced to rubble. Mr. Mendoza! A familiar voice called them. Jenna was walking toward them, wearing rubber boots and thick gloves. Her face was smudged with mud, but her smile was as bright as ever. Jenna, Theodore greeted, extending his hand. To his surprise, his daughters were not content with a formal greeting. Sophia and Beatrice ran to Jenna, wrapping her in a joint hug that nearly knocked her over. "Girls, be careful, I'm all covered in mud," Jenna protested, laughing, but returning the hug with equal enthusiasm. "How are you? And your family?" Sophia asked when they finally separated. "We're getting by," Jenna replied. "The shelter is cramped, but at least we're all together and healthy." "And your house?" Beatrice asked. Jenna's expression darkened slightly. "Destroyed, like most in town. But we're working on the cleanup to start rebuilding as soon as possible." Theodore, observing the interaction between the housekeeper and his daughters, noticed something he had never perceived before. There was a genuine affection there, a connection that transcended their professional relationship. It was as if Jenna were in some way part of the family. "Jenna, I'd like to speak with you in private," he said. "There's something important I need to discuss." "Of course, Mr. Mendoza," she replied. "We can go to the coordination tent. There should be a private space there." As they walked, Jenna explained to the twins the recovery activities that were underway. There were groups responsible for cleaning the streets, others for the safe demolition of condemned structures, and teams that managed the distribution of drinking water and food. "Do you want to help?" Jenna asked, noticing the genuine interest in the young women's eyes. "We need volunteers to organize the donations that are arriving." "Can we, Dad?" Beatrice asked eagerly. Theodore, who had always shielded his daughters from any kind of physical labor or contact with unsuitable environments, was surprised to realize that his instinctive response was not negative. "Of course," he replied. "Stay with Jenna while we talk. Then you can help with whatever is needed." In the coordination tent, Theodore and Jenna found a small, secluded space, an improvised table with plastic chairs, separated from the rest by canvas dividers. "Jenna," Theodore began without preamble, "I want to formally thank you for what you did for my daughters. There are no words or values that can adequately express my gratitude, but I want you to know that I am deeply indebted to you." Jenna lowered her eyes, uncomfortable with the formal tone. "Mr. Mendoza, as I've said, anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have," he contradicted gently, "and we both know that. You risked your life for Sophia and Beatrice, even after years of being treated, well, not in the best way by them." Jenna smiled faintly. "They're young. They're learning." "Yes, they are," Theodore agreed. "And it seems they've learned a valuable lesson from you." He paused before continuing. "Jenna, I know your house was destroyed. I would like to offer you not just financial compensation, but the opportunity for a new beginning." "A new beginning?" she asked, confused. "I have a property in New Orleans," Theodore explained. "A smaller but comfortable house that I rarely use. I would like to transfer it to your name as a gift." Jenna's eyes widened in shock. "A house? For me? Mr. Mendoza, that's too much. I can't accept it." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "It's the least I can do. Besides, I understand your son studies in New Orleans. It would be an opportunity for you to be closer." Jenna felt tears forming. The mention of Joaquin touched her mother's heart. Her son was in his third year of environmental engineering, living in a small rented room because it was all she could afford. A house in New Orleans would mean not only a home for her, but the chance to give her son better conditions to complete his studies. I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Theodore replied simply. "Accept this not as a payment, but as a sincere acknowledgement of what you did." Jenna took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "And what about my job? I would need to find a new job in New Orleans." "As for that," Theodore continued, "I have a proposal. I'm considering funding a reconstruction project here in St. Sebastian, not just for my property, but to help the community. I need someone who knows the town and the people well, someone I can trust to coordinate the day-to-day work." "Are you offering me a job?" Jenna asked, surprised. "I'm offering a partnership," Theodore corrected. "You would be the local project coordinator, with a salary commensurate with the responsibility, of course. You could live in New Orleans and come to St. Sebastian a few times a week. Once the highway is repaired, the drive isn't long." Jenna was silent, processing everything she had just heard. It was as if the entire universe had been turned upside down. From housekeeper to coordinator of a reconstruction project, from a simple house on the outskirts of St. Sebastian to her own home in New Orleans. "Why me?" she finally asked. "There are more qualified people with the proper training for a project of this scale." Theodore smiled. "Because you have something that no diploma can give, the trust and respect of the people here, and more importantly, you have the trust of my daughters and mine." Outside the tent, Sophia and Beatrice had taken on the task of organizing the arriving donations. Under the guidance of experienced volunteers, they sorted clothes, food, hygiene products, and medicine. "I never imagined that doing this kind of work could be satisfying," Beatrice commented as she folded a pile of t-shirts. Sophia nodded, understanding exactly what her sister meant. "It's different from anything we've ever done, isn't it? I feel like we're doing something that really matters." "You know what's strange?" Beatrice continued, lowering her voice. "I don't think I've ever felt so useful, so real." Sophia looked at her sister with new understanding. Beatrice, always so extroverted and seemingly confident, had also carried the weight of an existence based on appearances and possessions, not on genuine connections and meaningful actions. "I think I know what you mean," Sophia replied. "It's like before we were just existing, and now we're actually living." As the twins reflected on these new perceptions, Irene, Jenna's sister, approached them with a tired but welcoming smile. "Girls, the coordination team is serving a snack for the volunteers. You must be hungry." "We're fine, thank you," Sophia replied politely. Irene studied the two young women for a moment. "You know, when Jenna told me about you, I thought you would be a different." "Different how?" Beatrice asked, curious. "More arrogant, maybe," Irene answered with honesty. "After all, you're the daughters of the richest man in the region, but look at you now, working side by side with people you probably never even noticed before." The twins exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the truth in Irene's words. "We were like that," Sophia admitted. "Arrogant, selfish, blind to everything that wasn't our own little privileged world." "Did the flood change you?" Irene asked. "No," Beatrice replied after a moment of reflection. "Jenna changed us. The way she treated us even after years of being treated by us like someone invisible." Irene smiled, her eyes shining with pride for her sister. "Jenna has always had this gift of seeing the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves." At that moment, Theodore and Jenna emerged from the coordination tent. There was a serene expression on Jenna's face, a sparkle in her eyes that the twins had never noticed before. "What happened?" Sophia asked, approaching them. Jenna looked at Theodore, who nodded encouragingly. "Your father offered me an incredible opportunity," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "A house in New Orleans and a job coordinating a reconstruction project here in St. Sebastian. You accepted, didn't you?" Beatrice asked anxiously. Jenna smiled. "I accepted. It's a chance I never thought I'd have." "It's the least you deserve," Sophia said with sincerity. Theodore watched the interaction with a new perspective. For years he had measured success in numbers, contracts, acquisitions. His obsession with business had distanced him from his daughters, turning him into a figure more absent than present in their lives. Now, seeing them interact with Jenna, he realized how much he had lost and how much he could still recover. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," he announced, addressing not only his daughters and Jenna, but everyone around them. "St. Sebastian is going to rise again, stronger and better than before." His words were met with applause and expressions of hope. For a town accustomed to being ignored by the powerful, having the support of someone like Theodore Mendoza represented not just financial aid, but a recognition of its importance, of its right to exist and prosper. As the sun began to set over the devastated city, casting long shadows over the rubble and mud, Jenna watched the sky with a mixture of gratitude and determination. The tragedy had taken much, but it had also brought things she never expected. Respect, recognition, opportunities, and, most importantly, a genuine connection with her employer's daughters, who now, surprisingly, seemed more like friends than employers. "Tomorrow will be better," she murmured to herself, a statement that sounded both like a promise and a prayer. Sophia beside her heard her words. "It will be," the young woman agreed, "and we'll be here to help build it, together." Sophia's words, so different from the arrogant and disinterested young woman Jenna had known for years, were perhaps the greatest symbol of the transformation the flood had brought about. Not just in the physical structures of the town, but in the hearts and minds of people who, under normal circumstances, would never have had the chance to truly know each other, to truly see each other as equals. The reconstruction of St. Sebastian would be long and difficult, but as Jenna well knew, the greatest challenges often brought the greatest rewards. And sometimes it was necessary for everything to be destroyed so that something new and better could be built in its place, both in cities and in human relationships. Chapter 5. Metamorphoses. 6 months had passed since the devastating flood that transformed St. Sebastian. The town was slowly being reborn from the ruins. Where there was once only rubble and mud, new constructions now rose, more solid and planned to resist the forces of nature. Jenna observed the changes with a mixture of pride and nostalgia as she drove her car, a gift from Theodore that she had reluctantly accepted after realizing it would be essential for her new job, along the newly repaired highway connecting New Orleans to St. Sebastian. As the coordinator of the reconstruction project, she made this trip 3 times a week, supervising the works, distributing resources, and most importantly, listening to the needs of the residents. It was a sunny Thursday when Jenna parked her vehicle in the central square, which now served as a meeting point for volunteers, workers, and residents involved in the reconstruction. The old square, with its simple bandstand and century-old trees, had been completely destroyed by the flood. In its place, a new space was being built, more spacious, with elevated areas that could serve as a refuge in case of new floods and a memorial to the victims of the tragedy. "Jenna, good to see you," greeted Mr. Anthony, a man of nearly 70 who, despite his age, was one of the most dedicated workers on the project. "We were waiting for you to decide on the materials for the school." Jenna smiled, still getting used to the respectful treatment she now received from people who, before the flood, barely noticed her, as she walked the town's streets on her way to the Mendoza mansion. "Good morning, Mr. Anthony. Let's take a look at that right now," she replied, following the elderly man to the site where the town's only public school used to be. The reconstruction of the school was one of the priority projects defined by Theodore and Jenna. It would not be just a replica of the old structure, but a modern educational complex with laboratories, a library, and a multi-sport court. The businessman had not only provided substantial financial resources, but had also mobilized political and business contacts to attract investment to the town. As Jenna discussed technical details with the engineers and workers, a luxury car parked next to hers. Sophia Mendoza got out of the vehicle, wearing simple, practical clothes, jeans, a t-shirt, and boots, a far cry from the sophisticated style she used to sport before the flood. "Jenna," she called, approaching with a genuine smile, "I just got here from New Orleans. Dad asked me to bring the updated plans for the community center." In recent months, Sophia had become actively involved in the reconstruction project. Initially as a volunteer for the simplest tasks, she later took on increasing responsibilities. Her father, surprised and proud of his daughter's interest, had suggested she closely follow the development of the community center, a multi-purpose space that would include a small medical clinic, rooms for vocational courses, and an industrial kitchen for culinary training. "I'm glad you came," Jenna replied, hugging the young woman naturally. The relationship between them had evolved from a rigid employer-employee hierarchy to something close to friendship and mutual respect. "We have some questions about the school's foundation. Maybe you can help with that too." Sophia readily agreed. In recent months, she had developed a genuine interest in architecture and engineering, to the point of considering a change in her career plans. Before the flood, she planned to study fashion at a prestigious university in New York. Now she was talking to her father about the possibility of pursuing a degree in civil engineering or architecture. "Where's Beatrice?" Jenna asked, as they walked together to the makeshift office set up near the construction sites. "She stayed in New Orleans today. She's helping organize the charity festival," Sophia replied. The festival, conceived by Beatrice, was to be a cultural event to raise funds for the families affected by the flood. It would include performances by local artists, regional cuisine, and an art auction. For a young woman who previously was only interested in sophisticated parties and shopping at luxury malls, the change was impressive. "She's outdoing herself with this project," Jenna commented. Who would have thought that the girl who couldn't stand country food, as she called it, would now be planning an entire festival dedicated to local culture? Sophia laughed, recognizing the irony. "I know, I guess we've all changed, haven't we?" The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Joaquin, Jenna's son, who was leading a group of university students in environmental engineering. Theodore, impressed with the young man's academic potential, had funded a research project on flood prevention that now served as an internship for several university students. "Mom, Sophia," he greeted with a smile. Tall, athletic, and with the same expressive eyes as Jenna, Joaquin had become a respected figure in the reconstruction project. "I brought the students to see the drainage system we're implementing." Jenna couldn't hide her pride as she watched her son lead a group of future engineers, confidently explaining the technical details of the project he himself had helped develop. Professor Ricardo called earlier, Joaquin said, referring to his thesis advisor. He wants to include our project in an international publication on sustainable solutions for natural disaster prevention. That's wonderful, son, Jenna exclaimed, hugging him briefly. Sophia watched the interaction between mother and son with a discreet smile. There was something deeply inspiring in Joaquin's journey, a young man from a small town, the son of a housekeeper, who was now on the verge of becoming an internationally recognized environmental engineer. Your father will be proud when he hears, Sophia commented. He always says that investing in talents like yours is the best possible use of money. Theodore, in fact, had become an enthusiast for education as a tool for social transformation. In addition to funding Joaquin's project, he had created a scholarship program for young people from St. Sebastian, ensuring that the tragedy would not interrupt the academic training of the town's most promising students. The rest of the morning was dedicated to technical meetings and visits to the different work sites. Jenna, who had never attended college or received formal training in administration, surprised everyone with her natural organizational skills, her practical vision for solving problems, and, above all, her ability to connect with people, understanding their real needs. At lunchtime, Jenna, Sophia, and Joaquin gathered in the community cafeteria that had been set up to serve workers and volunteers. The simple but clean and welcoming place served nutritious meals prepared with local products. Mr. Evans sent a message, Sophia commented as they ate. He and Paul finally found a house they liked in Dallas. They're moving next month. Mr. Evans, Theodore's former driver, and Paul, the mansion's groundskeeper, had decided to start their lives over in Dallas, where they had relatives. Theodore had generously offered them both early retirement as well as financial assistance for the purchase of new homes. I'm happy for them, Jenna said, especially for Paul. He still has nightmares about the flood, poor thing. Paul had been rescued the morning after the tragedy, after spending the night clinging to the roof of a church. The experience had deeply traumatized him, to the point of developing an intense fear of water. Moving to a city far from the river would be therapeutic for him. Speaking of new beginnings, Joaquin said hesitantly, there's something I need to tell you. I received an internship offer for an international environmental preservation project. It's an incredible opportunity, but it would be in the Netherlands for a year. Jenna felt her heart ache. The idea of being a whole year away from her son was painful, but at the same time, she knew she couldn't be an obstacle to his future. Son, that's wonderful, she said, holding back her emotion. The Netherlands is a world reference in water management and flood prevention. You will learn so much there. Are you sure, Mom? Joaquin asked, sensing the contained emotion in Jenna's voice. It's a long time to be away. Absolutely, she replied firmly. Your grandfather always said that opportunities are like the river. If you don't take them when they pass, you never know when they'll come again. Sophia watched the interaction, admiring Jenna's ability to put her son's well-being above her own desires. It was a lesson in genuine love, in generosity, that contrasted sharply with the superficial environment in which she had grown up. Besides, Jenna continued, now with a mischievous smile, this gives me an excuse to finally see Europe. I've always wanted to see those windmills. You would visit? Joaquin asked, excited. Of course. Do you think I'd let my son go a whole year without a decent gumbo? The three of them laughed, easing the tension of the moment. Sophia, however, remained thoughtful. An international internship will look impressive on your resume, she commented. When you come back, you'll be able to choose where you want to work. Actually, Joaquin replied, I already know exactly where I want to work when I get back. Right here, in St. Sebastian. I want to apply what I learn there to ensure our town never suffers a tragedy like that again. Jenna felt her eyes well up. Her son's commitment to his roots, to the community that saw him grow, was an endless source of pride for her. She had always known Joaquin was special, that he had a different spark, but seeing him develop not only technical skills but also such a deep social consciousness surpassed any expectation she could have had as a mother. Speaking of which, Joaquin continued, the people at the university are planning a river monitoring project using satellite-connected sensors. It would be an early warning system to prevent new tragedies. That would be incredible, Sophia commented, genuinely interested. It could be integrated into the town's master plan, which we're currently revising. The master plan was another ambitious project born from the partnership between Theodore and the local government, a document that would establish guidelines for the orderly growth of the town, with preservation areas, safe housing zones, and spaces for sustainable economic development. After lunch, Jenna received a call from Beatrice. The charity festival was taking on larger proportions than expected, with national artists showing interest in participating. She needed Jenna's help to coordinate some logistical aspects, especially regarding the participation of local artisans and cooks. "I'll stop by New Orleans at the end of the day," Jenna assured her. "We can talk about it in person." When she hung up the phone, Sophia noticed a discreet smile on Jenna's lips. "What is it?" she asked, curious. It's strange, you know. Before the flood, I was just the housekeeper who cleaned your house. Now, your sister calls me for advice on how to organize a cultural festival." Sophia nodded, understanding the irony. "Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it?" "And how?" Jenna agreed. "Who would have thought that I, who barely finished high school, would be helping to rebuild an entire town?" "You were always more than your education, Jenna," Sophia said with sincerity. "We just couldn't see it." The afternoon wore on when Theodore arrived unexpectedly in St. Sebastian. In recent months, the businessman had divided his time between his business in New York and the reconstruction project, demonstrating a commitment to the town that surprised even his closest acquaintances. "Dad!" Sophia exclaimed, running to hug him as she saw him enter the makeshift office. "I didn't know you were coming today. I decided to stop by to see the progress of the works," he replied, returning his daughter's hug with a naturalness that would have been unthinkable before the flood. "And I also have important news to share." Theodore greeted Jenna and Joaquin with the same cordiality. The relationship between them had evolved into something close to a partnership based on mutual respect. The businessman, accustomed to leading teams of highly qualified executives, had found in Jenna a collaborator whose practical intelligence and social sensitivity perfectly complemented his technical skills and strategic vision. "What's the news?" Sophia asked eagerly. "The federal government has approved our proposal for the disaster prevention program," Theodore announced, visibly pleased. "We will receive funding to implement the river monitoring system and build flood containment areas." It was a significant victory. Theodore had spent weeks in Washington, D.C., negotiating with ministers and government technicians, presenting studies, and defending the importance of investing in prevention, not just in post-disaster reconstruction. "That's incredible, Mr. Mendoza," Joaquin commented enthusiastically. "With these resources, we can implement the project much more comprehensively." "The credit goes to you, Joaquin," Theodore replied, surprising the young man. "It was your studies and projects that convinced the ministry's technicians. They were particularly impressed with your integrated containment basin system." Joaquin blushed slightly at the compliment, while Jenna couldn't hide her maternal pride. For a woman who had spent her entire life cleaning other people's houses to ensure her son could study, seeing her effort rewarded in this way was the realization of a dream she had barely dared to entertain. "But that's not all," Theodore continued. "The project has been selected to be presented at the International Forum on Urban Resilience in Amsterdam next month." "Amsterdam?" Joaquin repeated, surprised. Wow. Coincidentally, that's where you'll be doing your internship, isn't it?" Theodore asked with a smile. "I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to present the project in person to representatives from the UN and other international organizations that will be present." Joaquin looked at his mother, as if seeking confirmation that he wasn't dreaming. Jenna just smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "And there's more," Theodore added, now addressing Jenna directly. "I would like you to go too, Jenna. As the project coordinator, your perspective would be very valuable." "Me?" Jenna asked, genuinely surprised. "But I've never spoken in public, and certainly not in English." "Don't worry about that," Theodore replied. "There will be simultaneous translation. And as for public speaking, well, I've seen you handle a meeting with 10 stubborn engineers at the same time. The International Forum will be a piece of cake compared to that." Everyone laughed, easing the tension of the moment. The idea of traveling abroad, of representing an international project, was something Jenna had never imagined for herself. It was as if life had suddenly opened doors she didn't even know existed. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Think fast," Theodore replied with a smile. "The flights to Amsterdam are next week." As the sun began to set over St. Sebastian, casting a golden glow on the new constructions emerging from the rubble of the past, Jenna contemplated the impressive changes that had occurred in her life over the last 6 months. From an invisible housekeeper to the coordinator of an international project, from a small house on the outskirts to a comfortable residence in New Orleans, from a distant and cold relationship with her employer's daughters to a genuine and respectful friendship. The tragedy of the flood, which had taken so much from so many people, had also brought unexpected and profound transformations. As if the violent waters, by destroying the physical structures of the town, had also washed away the invisible barriers that separated people like her from people like the Mendozas. Sophia, watching Jenna lost in thought as the sky turned red and orange, approached her. "What are you thinking about?" the young woman asked. "About how unpredictable life is," Jenna answered sincerely. "About how sometimes we have to lose everything to find things we didn't even know existed." Sophia nodded, deeply understanding what Jenna meant. She herself had lost her arrogance, her sense of superiority, the narrow worldview that once defined her personality. And in return, she had found a purpose, a deeper understanding of the true value of people and things. "You know what impresses me most about you, Jenna?" Sophia asked. "What?" "How you can see the positive side of everything, even a tragedy. How you can turn pain into strength, loss into opportunity." Jenna smiled, touched by the comment. "That's something I learned from the river. It destroys, yes, but it also creates. It sweeps everything away, but then it recedes, leaving the soil more fertile. Life is like that too. Tragedies come, they knock us down, they push us to the limit, but then if we know how to look closely, we realize there are seeds of renewal amidst the destruction." As the first stars began to dot the sky over St. Sebastian, Jenna felt a deep peace envelop her. The town still had a long road to recovery ahead, as did the people who lived in it. But now there was hope, solidarity, a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all human beings, regardless of their social, economic, or cultural differences. The metamorphosis of the town, of the Mendozas, of herself, was just beginning. And, like any genuine transformation, it would bring challenges, pain, uncertainties, but also infinite possibilities for growth, learning, and renewal. Chapter 6. New Horizons. Amsterdam's Schiphol International Airport was bustling with activity that autumn morning. Amidst the crowd of hurried passengers, Jenna observed everything with wonder-filled eyes. The signs in multiple languages, the sophisticated shops, the electronic panels announcing flights to destinations she only knew from maps. Everything was new, fascinating, and slightly intimidating. "Impressive, isn't it?" commented Theodore, who was walking beside her, pushing a cart with their luggage. "One of the most modern cities in Europe, and yet one of the oldest." Jenna nodded, still absorbing the enormity of the moment. She, Jenna Santos, born and raised in a small riverside town in Louisiana, was in the Netherlands. If someone had told her this a year ago, she would have laughed at the absurdity of the idea. "Where's Joaquin?" she asked, searching for her son in the crowd. "He went to exchange money and check the hotel's address," replied Sophia, who completed the small group. Beatrice had stayed in the US, coordinating the charity festival scheduled for the end of that month. The journey to Amsterdam had been long and tiring, with layovers in New York and Paris. Jenna, who had never flown before, had faced each stage with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. In the weeks leading up to the presentation at the International Forum, she had studied basic English with the help of Sophia and Joaquin, watched videos about the Netherlands, and read everything she could about natural disaster prevention. "Found you!" Joaquin exclaimed, approaching with an enthusiastic smile. "The hotel is about 20 minutes from here. We can take the train and then walk a bit." The hotel Theodore had chosen was a historic building in the heart of Amsterdam, near the famous canals that crisscrossed the city. Although the exterior preserved traditional Dutch architecture, the interior offered every modern comfort. "Wow," Jenna murmured, as she entered the elegant lobby, decorated with a harmonious blend of classic and contemporary elements. "It's beautiful. Wait until you see the room," commented Sophia, who had visited Amsterdam before on a school trip that at the time she had found too boring for her sophisticated tastes. After checking in, they were shown to their rooms on the 3rd floor. Jenna was speechless when she opened her door. It was larger than her old house in St. Sebastian, with a king-size bed, a marble bathroom, and a breathtaking view of one of the city's main canals. "Is all this for me?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "You deserve it, Mom," replied Joaquin, who had accompanied the three to their floor before heading to his own room, a few doors down. Alone in her room, Jenna allowed herself a moment of reflection. How had she gotten here? How had her life transformed so drastically in such a short time? Sitting on the edge of the luxurious bed, she looked at her own hands. Hands that for so long had cleaned, scrubbed, cooked, washed. Hands that knew hard work better than anything else. And now these same hands would hold a microphone, gesture before an international audience, present a project developed by her son, a project that could save lives. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Sophia. "May I come in?" the young woman asked, hesitating. "Of course," Jenna replied, standing up. Sophia entered, carrying a bag from a department store. "I bought something for you, for tomorrow's presentation." Jenna accepted the bag with curiosity. Inside was an elegant blazer and pants set in a deep shade of blue, accompanied by a cream-colored silk blouse. "It's beautiful, Sophia," Jenna said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Sophia interrupted with a smile. "Consider it a thank you gift. For everything you've done for us. Not just for saving us during the flood, but for showing us a different way of seeing the world." There was a sincerity in Sophia's voice that moved Jenna deeply. The arrogant and distant young woman who barely noticed her presence in the Mendoza mansion had transformed into a sensitive and conscious woman, capable of recognizing and valuing the qualities of people from any background or social class. "Thank you," Jenna said simply, hugging the young woman. Words seemed insufficient to express everything she felt at that moment. After a brief rest to recover from jet lag, they gathered in the lobby for a walk around the city. Joaquin, already familiar with Amsterdam thanks to 2 weeks of his internship, naturally assumed the role of guide. "This is Dam Square," he explained, as they walked through a large open area surrounded by historic buildings. "It's the heart of the city where it all began." Jenna observed everything with fascination. The bicycles that dominated the streets, the boats gliding through the canals, the unique architecture of the tall, narrow houses, the museums and cafes on every corner. It was a world completely different from her own, and yet strangely familiar in its human essence. "Joaquin!" a female voice called out, drawing the group's attention. A young woman of about 25, with short blonde hair and intensely blue eyes, was approaching them on a bicycle. She wore casual but elegant clothes and had a warm smile. "Lieka!" Joaquin exclaimed, visibly happy to see her. "What a coincidence to run into you here." "Not such a coincidence," she replied, getting off her bike. "I was coming from the university and I always pass through here. I thought you weren't arriving until tomorrow." "We got an earlier flight," Joaquin explained before turning to the rest of the group. "Let me introduce you. This is my mother, Jenna Santos. This is Theodore Mendoza, the funder of our project, and his daughter, Sophia." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Lieka said in surprisingly fluent English, though with an accent. "Joaquin talks a lot about you, especially about you, Mrs. Santos." "Please call me Jenna," she replied, extending her hand, which Lieka shook enthusiastically. "Lieka is the assistant coordinator of the internship program," Joaquin explained, "and also a PhD candidate in environmental engineering, specializing in water resource management." "Impressive," commented Theodore. "And your English is excellent." Lieka smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. I spent a year in the US as an exchange student. In New Orleans, actually, studying the Mississippi River systems. That's when I fell in love with the region and the culture." There was an evident chemistry between Joaquin and Lieka, the kind of connection that transcends cultural and linguistic barriers. Jenna noticed it immediately, with the keen instinct of a mother. "Would you like to join us for dinner?" she invited, to her son's surprise. "We're exploring the city and could use a recommendation for a good restaurant." "I'd love to," Lieka replied promptly. "I know a perfect place for your first night in Amsterdam. Authentic, but not too touristy." The restaurant Lieka suggested was a small family-run establishment on a side street, away from the hustle and bustle of the more crowded areas. Specializing in traditional Dutch cuisine, it offered comforting dishes that reflected the local history and culture. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally, covering topics such as the cultural differences between the US and the Netherlands, the challenges of water management in different geographical contexts, and expectations for the international forum that would begin the next day. "Your work is fascinating," Lika commented after Joaquin explained in detail the flood prevention system they had developed for St. Sebastian. It combines advanced technical knowledge with traditional wisdom and social sensitivity. It's exactly the kind of approach we advocate for here at the university. The main credit goes to Joaquin, Theodore said generously. He was the one who developed the initial concept and convinced all of us of its viability. Actually, Joaquin corrected, the inspiration came from my mother. She was the one who first noticed the signs of nature before the flood, based on the knowledge she received from her father, my grandfather, who was a fisherman. What I did was translate that ancestral wisdom into a technical language. Jenna felt her eyes well up at her son's acknowledgement. For her entire life, she had been invisible to the world beyond her immediate community. Her knowledge, her skills, her practical intelligence, all of it was ignored by a society that valued only diplomas and certificates. That's why our presentation tomorrow is so important, Joaquin continued. It's not just about a technical flood prevention system. It's about recognizing and valuing different forms of knowledge, about building bridges between the traditional and the modern, between the local and the global. You're going to do very well in academia, Lika commented with an admiring smile. You have a gift for turning complex concepts into inspiring narratives. I learned from my mother, Joaquin replied simply. She always had a gift for telling stories that made sense of the world, even when the world didn't seem to make any sense at all. The dinner extended for hours, the delicious food complemented by local wines and shared stories. For Jenna, it was as if a whole world of possibilities was opening up. Talking with Lika, an educated and sophisticated young European woman, she didn't feel inferior or out of place. On the contrary, she felt she had valuable experiences to share, unique perspectives to offer. Theodore, observing the interaction, reflected on his own journey. As a successful businessman, he had spent most of his life focused on accumulating wealth and power, believing that a person's value was directly linked to their financial success. The flood and everything that had happened since had fundamentally challenged that view. "What are you thinking about?" Sophia asked, noticing her father's contemplative expression. "About how grateful I am that I found you in that shelter," he answered honestly. "About how I could have lost the most precious thing in my life, and about how, even amidst the tragedy, I found a new way of seeing the world." Sophia nodded, understanding perfectly. She herself had undergone a profound transformation, abandoning the superficiality and materialism that once defined her identity in favor of a deeper understanding of the true value of people and things. After dinner, Lika offered to show them a bit more of the city at night. Amsterdam, illuminated by soft lights reflected in the canals, took on an almost magical beauty after dark. "The Dutch have a very special relationship with water," Lika explained as they walked along one of the main canals. "A third of the country is below sea level. For centuries, we have fought against floods, building dikes, windmills, drainage systems. But at the same time, we depend on water for trade, transport, agriculture. Like the people of St. Sebastian," Jenna observed. "The river is both our livelihood and our greatest threat." "Exactly," Lika agreed. "That's why your project is so important. It doesn't just seek to control nature, but to establish a more harmonious relationship with it, based on respect and understanding." The night wore on, and soon they said goodbye to Lika, who needed to prepare for her responsibilities at the forum the next day. Before she left, however, she and Joaquin exchanged glances that communicated much more than words could express. "She's special," Jenna commented as they were on their way back to the hotel. "Very," Joaquin agreed, with a smile his mother knew all too well. "And she likes you," she added. Joaquin didn't reply, but his smile widened, confirming what Jenna already suspected. The year-long internship in the Netherlands could bring much more than technical knowledge into her son's life. Back at the hotel, everyone retired to their rooms to rest before the big day ahead. Jenna, however, found herself unable to sleep immediately. Sitting by the window that offered a spectacular view of the illuminated canals, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From a small house on the banks of the Mississippi River to a luxury hotel in Amsterdam. From an invisible housekeeper to the coordinator of an international project. From a woman who had barely completed high school to someone about to present at a global forum. But more than the external changes, the job, the status, the opportunities, it was the internal transformations that truly mattered. The newfound confidence, the understanding of her own worth, the ability to see beyond appearances and social conventions. A soft knock on the door interrupted her reflections. It was Sophia, dressed in silk pajamas, her face washed clean of the makeup she rarely went without. "I can't sleep," the young woman confessed. "I'm nervous about the presentation tomorrow." Jenna smiled, recognizing the irony of the situation. "Me too. Come, sit here with me." Sophia settled into the armchair next to Jenna, the two of them contemplating the nocturnal beauty of Amsterdam in silence for a few minutes. "You know what's strangest?" Sophia said finally. "For the first time in my life, I'm nervous not for myself, but for someone else. I so want you to do well tomorrow, for everyone to see how extraordinary you are." The words touched Jenna deeply. "Thank you, Sophia. It means a lot to me to hear that from you." "It's the truth," the young woman continued. "Before the flood, I was, well, a horrible person. Egocentric, superficial, insensitive. I treated people like you as if they were invisible, as if they didn't deserve my attention or respect." "You were young," Jenna replied gently. "You were still learning about the world." "That's no excuse," Sophia insisted. "I'm ashamed of how I treated you, Jenna, and I'm eternally grateful that you saved me anyway." "I didn't just save your body from that flood," Jenna replied after a moment of reflection. "I think in a way I also helped save your soul. And you, Sophia, you saved me too." "Me?" Sophia asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes, you and your sister. Before the flood, I had resigned myself to a life of invisibility, of limitations. I accepted being treated as inferior, as someone who deserved no more than crumbs from the rich man's table. After the flood, when you started to really see me, to value my opinions, to treat me as an equal, that gave me the courage to dream of possibilities I had never considered." Sophia absorbed Jenna's words, understanding for the first time the profound impact that social prejudice and inequality can have on people's self-esteem and aspirations. How the simple act of truly seeing someone, of recognizing their intrinsic value as a human being, can be transformative. "I promise I will never be that person again," Sophia said with determination. "I will never again treat anyone as invisible or inferior." "I know you won't," Jenna replied with confidence. "You are an extraordinary woman, Sophia. Intelligent, sensitive, brave. You will do incredible things with your life." "I hope so," Sophia murmured, moved by Jenna's words. "And I hope you'll be by my side to see it." The two women, so different in their origins and experiences, yet so deeply connected by the shared experience of the flood and all that came after, remained together in contemplative silence, watching the lights of Amsterdam reflected in the waters of the canals. The next morning, the International Forum on Urban Resilience began in Amsterdam's impressive convention center. Hundreds of experts, government officials, academics, and activists from around the world gathered to discuss strategies for preventing and responding to natural disasters, with a special focus on vulnerable communities. Jenna, wearing the elegant suit Sophia had given her, felt her heart race as she waited backstage. Beside her, Joaquin reviewed his notes, seemingly calm, but she knew her son well enough to notice the tension in his shoulders. "Are we ready for this?" she asked, nervously adjusting the lapel microphone that had just been clipped to her outfit. "More than ready," Joaquin replied, holding his mother's hands in his. "Remember that we're not just here for ourselves. We're representing St. Sebastian, all the vulnerable river communities, all the people whose voices are rarely heard in spaces like this." Jenna nodded, finding renewed courage in her son's words. He was right. This was not just her story, or the Mendoza's story. It was the story of an entire community, of a town that had been destroyed and was now being reborn, transformed by tragedy, but also by solidarity, resilience, and the human capacity to learn and evolve. When they finally took the stage, to the polite applause of the international audience, Jenna felt a surprising calm wash over her. In the front row, Sophia and Theodore smiled encouragingly. A few rows back, Lieke watched with evident admiration. "Good morning," Joaquin began in fluent English. "My name is Joaquin Santos, and this is my mother, Jenna Santos. We come from St. Sebastian, Louisiana, a small town in the heart of the United States that less than a year ago was completely destroyed by an unprecedented flood." As Joaquin narrated the events of the tragedy, illustrated by photos and videos showing the devastation caused by the flood, Jenna watched the expressions of the audience, the shock, the empathy, the recognition of a reality that, though geographically distant, reflected challenges faced by communities worldwide. But we are not here to talk only about destruction, Joaquin continued. We are here to share a story of reconstruction, of transformation, of how an entire town is being reborn, stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. It was Jenna's cue. With a slight tremor in her voice that soon gave way to surprising confidence, she began to speak in English, with simultaneous translation into several languages. "My father was a fisherman," she began, her voice clear and steady, despite her initial nervousness. "From the time I was a child, he taught me to read the signs of the river, to respect its power, to understand its cycles. This knowledge, passed down from generation to generation among the river communities, saved many lives during the flood." As she spoke, Jenna felt increasingly confident. She was not just representing herself or St. Sebastian. She was giving a voice to all the traditional communities whose ancestral knowledge is often ignored by the academic and scientific world, to all the people who, like her, lived on the margins of society, invisible despite their essential contributions. "Our project," she explained, "combines this traditional knowledge with modern technology to create an early warning system that not only monitors water levels and weather patterns, but also integrates local observations, oral histories, the collective wisdom of those who have lived with the river for generations." The presentation continued with Joaquin explaining the technical aspects of the system, the sensors, the algorithms, the communication platforms, while Jenna focused on the human and social aspects, on the importance of involving the local community in every stage of the process, of valuing different forms of knowledge, of building solutions that respected local culture and values. At the end of the 30 minutes allotted for their presentation, the auditorium erupted in enthusiastic applause. Questions came from various points in the audience, some technical, directed at Joaquin, others social and cultural, directed at Jenna. She answered with a clarity and confidence that surprised even herself, as if a lifetime of silent observation, of inner reflection, of deep understanding of the world around her, had finally found expression. When the session finally ended, Jenna and Joaquin were surrounded by participants interested in learning more about the project, discussing possible collaborations, and exploring how similar approaches could be applied in different geographical and cultural contexts. Sophia and Theodore watched the scene with a mixture of pride and admiration. The housekeeper, who barely spoke during meals at the Mendoza mansion, was now animatedly conversing with international experts, sharing her unique wisdom, her valuable perspective. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Sophia commented. "She always was," Theodore replied thoughtfully. "We were just the ones who didn't have the eyes to see." In that moment, as Jenna shone under the lights of the Amsterdam Convention Center, her voice finally being heard, her knowledge finally being valued, something significant was happening not just for her, but for everyone involved. A deeper understanding of the true value of people beyond titles, possessions, or social status. A recognition of the interconnectedness of all human beings, regardless of their differences. An appreciation for the diversity of knowledge and experiences that, when respected and integrated, enriches everyone. Chapter 7. Waters of Transformation. A year had passed since the International Forum on Urban Resilience in Amsterdam. Spring had arrived in full force in St. Sebastian, Louisiana, covering the rebuilt town with colorful flowers and a renewed sense of hope. The intense blue sky, typical of the region, was reflected in the now calm waters of the river that snaked through the area. The town's completely remodeled central square was bustling with activity that Saturday morning. It was a day of celebration in St. Sebastian, the official inauguration of the Joaquin Santos Cultural Center. The imposing building, constructed on high ground, housed a library, an auditorium, rooms for art and craft workshops, and a small museum dedicated to local history, including a permanent exhibition on the Great Flood and the town's reconstruction process. "Nervous?" Sophia asked Jenna, as they adjusted the final details for the inauguration ceremony. "A little," Jenna admitted with a smile. "I never imagined I'd see my father's name on a building like this." The cultural center had been named in honor of Jenna's father, the fisherman whose wisdom about the river and nature had inspired the flood prevention system now implemented not only in St. Sebastian but in several other riverside towns in the US. "He deserves it," Sophia replied sincerely. "Without the knowledge he passed on to you, and that you passed on to Joaquin, Many lives would have been lost. Jenna nodded, emotional. Her father had passed away 15 years earlier, never imagining that his simple, practical knowledge, transmitted orally from generation to generation, would one day be recognized and valued to the point of inspiring advanced technological systems for disaster prevention. Speaking of Joaquin, Jenna said, looking around, where is he? The ceremony starts in half an hour. He should be here soon, Sophia replied, checking her watch. The flight from New Orleans lands at 10, and Beatrice went to pick him up from the airport. Joaquin had returned to the US 2 weeks ago after completing his one-year internship in the Netherlands. However, shortly after his arrival, he was invited to participate in a conference in Washington, D.C., where he presented the preliminary results of the flood prevention system implemented in St. Sebastian. "And what about Lika?" Jenna asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide her maternal interest. "Is she really coming?" Sophia smiled, aware of the hope Jenna held of seeing her son and the young Dutch woman together again. During the year Joaquin was in the Netherlands, Jenna had visited the country twice, once at the university's invitation to present cultural aspects of the project, and another time simply as a tourist, eager to get to know the place where her son lived and worked. "From what I know, she's been in the US for 3 days, Sophia replied. "First she went to D.C. for the conference, and then she was going to spend a few days in New Orleans before coming here." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Theodore, who approached accompanied by several local authorities, the mayor, council members, representatives from civil defense, all in their most formal attire for the occasion. "Jenna," Theodore called, waving, "the governor has just arrived. He would like to meet you in person before the ceremony." In recent months, Jenna had grown accustomed to interacting with authority figures. Since the forum in Amsterdam, her name and face had appeared in newspapers, magazines, and television programs, both national and international. She had been invited to speak at universities, participate in public policy forums, and share her experience and knowledge in various contexts. For a woman who had spent most of her life being invisible to society beyond her immediate community, it was an extraordinary change. However, Jenna kept her feet firmly on the ground, never forgetting her humble origins, never allowing public recognition to change her essence or values. As Sophia sent a message to her sister, a commotion at the entrance of the square caught her attention. Beatrice was arriving, accompanied by Joaquin, and, to Jenna's delight, had she been watching Lika. But it wasn't just the presence of the young Dutch woman that was causing a stir. It was the fact that she and Joaquin were walking hand in hand, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by anyone. The ceremony began promptly at 11 o'clock, with the square completely packed. Theodore was the first to speak, his voice initially hesitant, but gaining strength as he spoke about the extraordinary journey of St. Sebastian, from devastation to reconstruction, from tragedy to transformation. 2 years ago, he said, this town was literally wiped off the map by an unprecedented flood. Homes, schools, hospitals, businesses, everything was destroyed. Lives were lost. Dreams were interrupted. The future seemed bleak, uncertain. Theodore paused, his eyes scanning the crowd that watched him in respectful silence. "But today," he continued, "we are here to celebrate not just the physical reconstruction of this town, but the reconstruction of its spirit. We are here to honor the resilience of a people who refused to be defined by tragedy, who found strength in adversity, who turned despair into hope." Enthusiastic applause interrupted his speech. Theodore waited for it to subside before continuing. "This cultural center we are inaugurating today is more than a building. It is a symbol of what we can achieve when we work together, when we recognize the value of each individual, each contribution, each form of knowledge. It is a testament to the transformative power of solidarity, empathy, and cooperation." His eyes met Jenna's, sitting in the front row between the mayor and the governor. "And that is why," Theodore concluded, "it is so fitting that this center bears the name of Joaquin Santos, not the brilliant environmental engineer we all know today, but his grandfather, the humble fisherman who, with his wisdom about the river and nature, taught us a vital lesson, that true knowledge comes not only from books or universities, but from careful observation, lived experience, and a deep connection with the world around us." Theodore finished his speech by inviting Jenna to the stage, a gesture that perfectly symbolized the transformation in social relations that the tragedy had catalyzed. There was a silent communication between them, a shared acknowledgement of the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. Jenna walked onto the stage to warm applause. Wearing a turquoise suit that highlighted her eyes, she seemed the personification of dignity and quiet strength. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her clear, firm voice echoing through the square. "It is with immense emotion that I address you today, not just as the coordinator of the reconstruction project, but as the daughter of Joaquin Santos, the man whose name now adorns this wonderful cultural center." She paused, taking a deep breath to control the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her voice. "My father was a simple man. He never attended school for more than a few years, never traveled beyond the state borders, never imagined that his name would one day be engraved in golden letters on the facade of a building like this. But he possessed a richness that no diploma could confer, the wisdom born from attentive observation, from a deep connection with nature, from respect for the river that was both a source of life and danger." Jenna continued, narrating how her father's knowledge had been passed down to her, and subsequently to Joaquin, forming the conceptual basis of the flood prevention system that now protected not only St. Sebastian but several other river communities. "The tragedy we experienced 2 years ago was devastating," she said, her voice taking on a somber tone. "We lost homes, belongings, tangible memories of our lives. But amidst the destruction," Jenna continued, her voice now rising with hope, "we discovered something precious. The human capacity to overcome artificial divisions, to recognize the value in each individual, to build bridges between worlds that once seemed separated by insurmountable chasms. This cultural center," Jenna went on, "will be a space where different forms of knowledge are valued and celebrated, where traditional wisdom and modern science will converse on equal footing, where children from all social backgrounds will have access to books, art, music, technology, where the past will be honored and the future will be imagined collectively." She paused significantly before concluding. "And perhaps most importantly, it will be a constant reminder that the waters that once divided us, the river with its destructive fury, but also the invisible waters of social inequality, of prejudice, of indifference, can also unite us, transform us, and lift us to a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly human." The applause that followed was deafening. Jenna, emotional, acknowledged it with a humble gesture, before inviting Joaquin to the stage for the symbolic act of cutting the ribbon, officially inaugurating the cultural center that bore his grandfather's name. "Before we cut the ribbon," Joaquin said, after warmly hugging his mother, "I would like to make a special announcement." A curious murmur rippled through the audience. "Many of you know that I spent the last year in the Netherlands, working on an international water resource management project," Joaquin continued. "What you may not know is that, during that year, I found not only technical knowledge and professional opportunities, but also," he looked at Lika with a radiant smile, "love." Exclamations of surprise and joy rose from the crowd. Jenna brought her hands to her face, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "Lika and I," Joaquin announced, holding the young Dutch woman's hand, "are engaged. We plan to get married right here in St. Sebastian next month, and we would like to invite all of you to celebrate with us." The square erupted in applause and congratulations. The ceremony proceeded with the cutting of the ribbon and the official opening of the cultural center. In the small museum dedicated to the history of the flood and reconstruction, a photographic exhibition captured key moments of the journey. In a prominent place, one particular photograph caught the visitors' attention. Jenna, Sophia, and Beatrice, soaked and exhausted, embracing in the shelter the day after the flood. "Remember this day?" Sophia asked Jenna, who was looking at the photograph. "How could I forget?" Jenna replied. "It was when everything changed. For the better," added Beatrice, joining them. "Despite all the pain, all the loss." "It's strange to think of it that way," Jenna reflected, "but that flood, so destructive, was also like a new beginning, as if the waters had washed away not just the town, but our perceptions, our prejudices, our limitations." "Waters of transformation," Sophia murmured, recalling Jenna's words from her speech. The celebration extended through the rest of the day and into the night. At one point, Jenna stepped away from the crowd, seeking a moment of quiet. She sat on a bench by the Mississippi River, watching the reflection of the full moon on the now calm and controlled waters. "May I join you?" Theodore's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Of course," she replied, making room on the bench. "Have you ever thought," he began finally, "about how different our lives would have been if the flood had never happened?" Jenna considered the question before answering. "Many times," she admitted. "I would probably still be cleaning your house, invisible to you and your daughters. You would still be the work-obsessed businessman distant from the girls. Sophia and Beatrice would still be the superficial, spoiled young women I first met. And what about us?" Theodore's question was soft, almost hesitant. "You and me, I mean. We probably would have never really known each other," she answered finally. "Not for real." "It's a shame to think about," Theodore commented. "All those lost years when I could have known the extraordinary woman you are." The sincere compliment warmed Jenna's heart. "It's never too late," she said with a smile. Theodore covered her hand with his, a simple gesture, yet laden with meaning. "The future is full of promise," he said, gently squeezing her hand, "for all of us." As the starry sky stretched infinitely over St. Sebastian, Jenna felt a deep peace envelop her. The town she loved had been reborn, stronger and more just. Her son was about to marry a wonderful woman. Sophia and Beatrice had transformed into conscious and empathetic women, and she, Jenna Santos, once invisible to the world, was now seen, heard, and valued. The waters of the flood had destroyed much, but they had also carried away artificial barriers, ingrained prejudices, self-imposed limitations. In their place, they had left fertile ground for new constructions, not just of houses and buildings, but of relationships, communities, and ways of seeing and being in the world. As they walked back to join the celebration, Jenna and Theodore walked side by side, their silhouettes outlined against the lights of the Joaquin Santos Cultural Center. In the center of the square, Joaquin and Lika danced, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. Sophia and Beatrice chatted animatedly with local youths, planning future projects. Children ran freely among adults of all social classes, their laughter symbolizing the promise of a more inclusive future. And so, under the starry Louisiana sky, the town celebrated not just its physical reconstruction, but its spiritual rebirth. The waters that had once threatened to destroy it completely now flowed peacefully, tamed but respected, a perfect symbol of the human capacity to transform destruction into creation, despair into hope, and division into unity. As Jenna had said in her speech, they were waters of transformation, revealing the best in each person when confronted with challenges that seem insurmountable.